Hello, everyone, and welcome to our engineer interview with NASA flight surgeon Josef Schmid. My name is Scott, and I'm your host for today. Before we start, I would just like to say thank you very much for signing up to this year's competition. For those of you who don't know, this is the Leaders Award competition, where we ask the question, if you were an engineer, what would you do? Pupils from the ages of 3 to 19 anywhere in the UK can join, and every single person who takes part will receive a named and graded certificate from a real-life engineer, just like the ones we interview. Now, during these interviews, we're going to be speaking with engineering professionals who work on loads of different projects, all of them showing the wonderful, interesting, and exciting things that happen when you work in engineering. Now, our special guest is going to start with a presentation all about life as a space doctor, and then we're going to open up to the audience for questions. If you do have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and please include your name or school name so I can read that out when we ask the questions. But I think that's everything from me. I would like to pass over to Joseph, who's going to start their presentation.
Well, good morning, everybody in the UK. This is Joe Schmid, and I'm normally in Houston, but I'm talking from San Francisco this morning. So glad to join with each of you, and I want to talk to you about a career in aerospace medicine you may not have heard about. I'm going to fly, you guys. We're going to fly through our presentation, and hopefully, if you have any questions, please hold them to the end. And if you don't understand something because my Southern English doesn't sound clear to you, I'll try to restate it. Let me see if I can progress. All right. Well, one of my patients said this to me. He said on television, actually, how far can we go and how fast can we get there? And who among us are willing to do it? That was General Tom Stafford. He flew around the moon just before Neil Armstrong. So he was the test pilot for the moon landing. This is what you get when you're a flight surgeon. I'm not a surgeon. I'm a family physician, a general practitioner, as you all see, a GP, I think it is. But you get to fly with your patients. And that's actually how I heard about this job. I went to a lecture like I'm giving to you, and the guy said, you can take care of pilots. And I said, that's kind of neat. And he said, if you say they're healthy enough to fly, and you sign as a doctor, they have to take you flying with them. And I asked him, what did you just say? I said, yes, you have to you have to go flying with them. So I knew what I wanted to do. And then he mentioned there was a group of flight surgeons down at the Johnson Space Center taking care of astronauts. And I knew where I wanted to go. I was your age, you guys and gals. The left-hand picture shows Armstrong, or one of the astronauts, I think it's Buzz Aldrin, actually landing on the moon and walking on the moon. I was 4 years old, and when I saw that, my mother woke me up and she said, you got to see this, and I'll never forget it. And then I was hooked. I would watch the television, and I would just watch all the missions. And I remember Apollo 17, the picture on the right-hand side that shows the Apollo 17 launching from after it landed on the moon, going back to Earth. And I told my parents I had a tummy ache. I couldn't go to church because I had a tummy ache, but I was really telling a fib because I wanted to see them launch from the surface of the moon. And then the bottom picture shows a Soviet cosmonaut and that same Tom Stafford getting together in orbit called the Apollo-Soyuz test project. And that was at the time where we were really kind of fighting each other. But it showed to me that we could be friends in space. And I was just inspired by that. That's how I got involved with this. This is a really busy picture, but it shows a map for you about the education path that you can do. There are many paths that you can take to becoming a flight surgeon or working in the space program. And it just tells you how much education you might get by when you do that, as well as how much fun you can have along the way. And I can answer questions later about this as well. Here's a picture. The guy on the right-hand side is me, and the guy on the left-hand side, and I fly with a lot of women as well. He's the pilot, or she's the pilot, and I fly in the back seat. Every time I get in the back seat of this T-38 airplane, it feels like 12 Christmases all at the same time. And I think, gosh, who let me in here? And then we fly, and I think, oh, this is actually real. So much fun. This is the office that those guys and gals fly in, and I have to do this so I understand what it is to fly and how things happen very fast. They can also fly aerobatics and fly cross country, and you actually get paid to do this. I can't believe we get to do it. And here's another airplane that we fly in. You may have heard about this. It's called the Weightless Wonder. It's also called the Vomit Comet. And it's basically you fly out over the Gulf, and they give you a period of time where you get weightless. Basically, you float in the airplane, and we can talk about how that works. But you float in the airplane for about 45 seconds. And the good thing is sometimes we take a little bit of medication so that we don't feel sick. And don't worry, if you've ever been seasick or you've been air sick, don't worry, because people who go to space, even pilots, they feel a little funny when they go. And the ones actually who don't feel seasick many times are geologists or other scientists. So it really doesn't matter. We can all get through that. And we can talk about how to fix that too, because you guys and gals want to be engineers, and there's all these problems that we have that we need to work out. Here's a picture of some other airplanes. We actually fly some approaches like we would fly in the shuttle, and we can talk about how that all works as well. But can you imagine going into an airplane and you put the flaps down, the gear down, and the engine's in reverse? And it's really kind of scary for me to do that, but it's also a lot of fun, and we do it very safely. There are so many new vehicles, you guys and gals. We had the space shuttle before, but we're flying the Soyuz now and the International Space Station. And here's another picture of SpaceX and Boeing and Blue Origin. There are just so many new vehicles that we're working on and going to so many places. So far, there have been only 600 or so, 700 people who've left the planet. So a very small number of people. But with all these new space going vehicles, we're going to have a need for more people to fly and more people to support each of these companies. And I also want to mention Stephanie and Scott and Susan that and hope they've told you there are so many jobs in addition to being an astronaut that you can work in the space program. Like me, I'm a physician, and there we have accountants, we have computer experts, we have all kind of people who build things, tons of engineers, aerospace engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical systems engineers, biomedical engineers, lots of jobs you can do in space because we have lots of problems that we want to work out. Here's the vehicle that I'm working on. It's the Orion vehicle, and it's going to go back to the moon. Like I said, I was 4 years old when they landed on the moon, and I'm now 59. So we're trying to go back to the moon, and we have lots of problems to figure out what we need to take with us, how we need to protect our astronauts, and how we get them safely back. Here's a busy slide, but it basically talks about a field called epidemiology, which is data that we follow on all the astronauts. We follow all their labs throughout their lifetime, and we try to see if there's anything that they need when it comes to medical issues or what we see with that long term. Here's a picture of a team. Actually, we were talking earlier about that it takes, you can work by yourself a lot if you're working on a special project and if you're studying, but it's a heck of a lot more fun if you're working with other people. And this is a picture showing astronauts getting ready to fly on the space shuttle, and you see three flight surgeons down there, and we have many women flight surgeons as well now, thankfully. And it's all fun because you get to work with team. And there's a picture of the space shuttle on the pad as well. Here's Don Pettit. He's getting ready to go to orbit in this picture. He's actually on board the space station right now. And when he's 69 years old, and when he comes back, he'll be 70 years old. Can you believe that? But he's really stayed in great health all his life. The fun thing is, and we were talking earlier, that sometimes the astronauts will ask the physicians at the last minute, hey, have you got some medication? And I have a flight suit on that I normally wear, and I have to figure out what medications I need to bring, and I have to guess. And so I'm almost like I'm pulling a rabbit out of a hat out of my pocket. I try to give them the medication that they need because they need it right then. So how to predict that. And then the neat thing is we're about 1.5 to 3 miles away from the space vehicle when it launches, and you can feel it in your chest, the vibration, and you feel so proud to know that your patients and your astronauts are on board that space vehicle and it's getting launched. And then it goes from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour when it goes into space really fast. It gets there in 8 and 9 minutes. So lots of physics and lots of engineering. All those things have to work well together. And here's a picture of one of the astronauts, Eric Boe. You can see that big smile on his face, but you can also, and because he's just got to space, and you can see this big suit that he has to wear and all the equipment. So we have to have engineers and other people figure out how to make those suits smaller and how they can make them better. Here's a picture of Sandy Magnus. She's actually out of her spacesuit, and she's wearing her pajamas, it looks like, and she's trying to figure out how to put things in different places. She's a scientist and an engineer herself. And so we have many women flight personnel and astronauts now as well. So everybody can do this. And some people do feel sick. This is kind of a joke of a picture, but like I mentioned, 70%. And I tell you, like I mentioned before, some of the Top Gun pilots, they feel more sick than some of the people who are geologists or other scientists. So it doesn't matter. And the good thing is we have some medication, and people feel very quickly, they feel better as well. And this is a picture showing why that is, because you have these balance organs, just like sensors in your computer or sensors in your car. You have these sensors in your ears that tell you how to balance and which way is up. And because when you go to space, those things are not functioning normally like you on Earth. People feel a little funny. So that's what happens. And people get a little dizzy. But the good thing is that people will, after they on space for a for a day or two, they feel much better. Here's another picture showing all the fluid shifts. So when you're walking on the ground, the fluid collects in your legs and your heart pumps it back to your heart. I mean, yeah, back to your heart, and then it distributes well. When you go into orbit, everything equalizes out, and people get a stuffy face. I think I have a picture of that coming up here pretty soon. Yes, here's one of the early astronauts, and you can see on the right-hand side, his face really got it kind of puffy because of all those fluid shifts. The other things that the astronauts are exposed to is lots of radiation. So we have lots of shielding around them, but we have lots of problems that you guys can figure out. Every once in a while, the sun burps and it throws a bunch of stuff out and it causes the northern lights to get really bright. Well, that's not good for humans, and we need to be able to protect them. Here's the other fun thing. You see all these people? Those are all the people you get to work with in mission control, and all of them have different engineering backgrounds. How do you work and how do you talk with each other? I'm a physician, so I speak English, Southern English, of course. But I also have to speak medical English, and then I have to learn engineering English, and sometimes we speak in Russian and Japanese, and so we have to learn how to talk with each other. The spacewalks are like reverse scuba dives. It's going from high pressure down to low pressure, and how do we make sure that we don't have any bubbling, what's called dysbarism or the bends, and we can talk about that too. And then the shuttle and other vehicles, they come back home, and the fun thing is when they land, sometimes they land on the water, on the ground, or sometimes they come in on a runway. And there are two people that go into the space shuttle or the vehicle first, and that's usually an astronaut and a flight surgeon after that. So we get to talk to our crew. Here's the crew right after they landed, and that reverse issue happens because they had their fluid shifts. When they come back to walking on the ground, they actually feel lightheaded. And so how do we figure out how to help people's blood pressure stay normal? Here's a picture of Katie Coleman. Like I said, we have lots of women who are flight surgeons, and she's getting measurements made there in Russia to how to have custom gloves made. So we need engineers to figure out how to do very good gloves. She's actually got into this little bunny suit, and she's getting into this little tub, and this guy looks like Leonardo da Vinci, doesn't he? And they're gonna pour some paper mache or some kind of material in there. You can see him, he's pouring this stuff in there, and that's going to give a mold to her body, and so that she has a custom seat when she goes to space. And then Leonardo da Vinci and these other guys, and they scrape out the mold, and they make sure it fits perfectly. And here's a picture of Katie Coleman. She says, my seat fits perfectly, because she's going to take that seat to orbit, and it's going to work well. Then when they roll the rocket out, the number of engines on the back of this thing is beautiful. This is actually a picture of the Russian rocket. We fly from all over the world now. This is a Russian rocket, and there's going to be an astronaut in there. That's why they have the American flag. If they have a British astronaut, they put in a British flag on there as well. And then it's raised up to be able to go to orbit and straight up and down. And as a flight surgeon, we get to fly in the Russian helicopters. I've flown with people from all over the world, and we're there in case there's some problem with the rocket. If it lands on so before going to space, we have to go out and pick them up. And the fun thing is, it's so close. Like I mentioned, it's about a mile or so away from you. You can really feel proud when it launches. You can feel in your chest. Here's some other pictures where we're working as teams too on simulations, because everything we do, we train before we do it. So every spacewalk, they do 7 hours of training and simulation before we do 1 hour spacewalk. And we think about all the problems that we can have. And we talk about, hey, if this happens, what are we going to do? If we run out of fuel or we run out of air, what are we going to do? If we have a medical problem, what are we going to do? So it's so much fun sitting around and thinking problems and thinking solutions. Here's a picture of on orbit when they're getting ready to do a spacewalk. And here's a fun picture when it comes back in. It's actually in Kazakhstan, another country. So geography is very important. Where do you land things there? And you can see the on the right-hand side is coming in on a parachute, and on the left-hand side, you see all the ground people that are coming over to help them. It lands on a parachute and it hits. There's some rockets on the bottom of it that actually fire, and that's what that sand is getting kicked up. Because the rockets are firing, and then it sometimes it bounces. You can see the little holes there where it hit, and then it kind of rolls. And that's why Katie Coleman had to have that seat really fitting her perfectly, because she doesn't want to get banged around like you're in a car accident, And so we have all these engineering problems and solutions that you guys and gals can come up with, and how to do that, how to help that be very safe. And then you can see the blackness on this spacecraft, because what happened is it was coming in so fast that it had this heat shield on it that actually burns away and protects the astronauts that are inside. There are 3 people that are inside this vehicle, and when they land, it was very, very hot as it was coming through, but they were very, very safe inside of there. And here's the flight surgeon, that's me. I'm looking inside to see how my crew members are. So we're right there with them, looking inside, and you can see inside the spacecraft, and you see where you can see the cosmonauts and the astronauts. It's like you're in the front of a very small car, and you have all your luggage in there with you. Can you imagine how tight that is? But that's what you have to do when you have a very small spacecraft, and you have to bring all your food and everything else with you. So lots of engineering problems. We have to figure out how to make things very small, very light, and they don't require a lot of power and things like that. And here's one of my astronauts. He's not feeling so good. Because his gyros, his sensors inside his head are telling him which way is up. But once he's in his seat and feeling much better, he's smiling, and everybody's really happy that he's home. And then the other interesting thing is when they're walking, they have difficulty walking. It's almost like when you first learn to walk, you walk with a very wide spaced gait. So you can see he's having difficulty in it. I'm walking behind him, and I want to make sure that he doesn't fall down. So, but after about a day or so, they have no issues walking, and I really have to tell them, don't run, because I don't want you to hurt yourself. So that's what happens. So we have lots of, like I mentioned, power, mass, and volume. How do you make things smaller? How do you make them lighter? And how do you make sure that they're low power? And we're going to need all those kind of problems figured out when we go back to the moon and onto Mars, and we'll talk about those things too. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to get spacecraft up to the space station, that upper left-hand picture, and then how are we going to drive on the moon, and how are we going to take our luggage and get it into our small hotel that we have on the moon? How are we going to keep the air, and how are we going to keep the dust out of our house there? It's got to be really clean inside. You don't want to bring that stuff in. How do we clean our shoes off, and how do we dust things off? Those are all problems that we need to figure out. And then we have other analogs. The fun thing is that not only can we go to space, but we can also do things here on Earth that are just like space, but you're not in space. So you can go diving, you can go to remote locations like Antarctica, and you can go to oil rigs. I know the UK has a lot of oil rigs, and those are really kind of what are called space analogs, which means it's all the same except that you're not in space. And here's this crazy thing I wanted to tell you guys about. We were the first humans who were holoported to space. And what is holoportation? What we did was we took a special camera, and it scanned us in 3D. And there were astronauts on board the space station, and they were wearing what's called a HoloLens. And that astronaut, she could see me. I was floating in space. So it was science fiction that becomes science fact. She could roll around and see me floating in the middle of the space station. The other cool thing is that she got a little too close to me, and she said, "Man, I've never had a flight surgeon get so close to me. You're in my personal space." So I knew that I was actually there. Okay. And the other problem, and I know I'm at 17 minutes now, is when we talk to the moon, it takes a long time to get there, about a second or so. When we talk to Mars, though, they're going to be 8 to 20 minutes delay. So it's like talking to somebody on the telephone, and then you got to wait 8 to 20 minutes before they reply to you. So anyway, long story short is, I hope you guys and gals are thinking of all the engineering problems that we have and how your solutions, and I have some contact information. I'm looking forward to getting any questions, Scott. Thank you very much, you guys.
There has been loads of questions coming in, and I wish I could ask all my questions. I'm that interested, but I think it's fair we leave it up to everybody else. But as I'm the interviewer, I do get the first question, and I want to know, what's the thing you love most about your job?
I love that I get to work with so many really fun people, and so many people that are smarter than me, and they really know what their backgrounds is. So I work with really smart accountants. I work with smart pilots. And then we also get to work with people from around the world, like Tim Peake, who is from the UK. And we work with Japanese astronauts and Russian doctors. That's just makes life really fun, because you get to meet people from all these different places.
That's what it looked like in your photos. There's people in all of them, and you seem to have been all over the world doing it. So there must be some pretty incredible people you work with.
There are, and as I mentioned, I get to take care of the astronauts. So that one picture of the guy and gals that are on the moon. I was their family doctor for 25 years. And can you imagine being a family doctor to the astronauts who walked on the moon? Just crazy the stories they told me about what it was like to fly and land on the moon. And those were the people I was watching on television. And now we're taking care of the next group of astronauts that are going to walk on the moon. And it's going to be a lady and another man. So it's going to be loads of fun.
Oh, brilliant. Well, there have been loads of questions coming in, so I'm going to go to the questions coming in from all of our pupils and teachers. This question comes from Ashley in year 5, who would like to know what effect G-force has on the body because they've been learning about different forces in their science class.
Fantastic question, Ashley. And what happens is if you get we're all exposed to G forces right now, 1G, because that's what we're being pulled down. And then if you ever go on a roller coaster, you feel increased G's, right? So it depends on which way the G forces are. So a lot of times you feel accelerations, you feel like, oh man, I'm going faster. Or we on a roller coaster, you feel sometimes spinning of your head, and that's probably a lot of fun. And then sometimes if you do it too much, you feel kind of queasy. Like I mentioned, though, most people feel like that when they go to space. And so even the people who are Top Gun pilots who said, I have no problems flying when I'm in a plane, they have problems. And the scientists who normally have problems because they're, whatever, they don't have any problems when we go to space. And I can tell you when I fly in the back seat of that jet, sometimes when I'm flying it, and the people up front, they go, hey, Joe, can you not be so crazy with your motions because it's making them really feel like they are getting kind of queasy. Anyway, that's what kind of affects with the G forces. And then when you remove the G forces, then things happen too. You feel the swelling in your face, and if you remove enough G forces over a long period of time, then sometimes people will lose bone in the calcium in their bone, and they're at risk for fractures and things. So we need engineers to figure out how can we increase the amount of G's? Maybe we need to have spinning space vehicles like you've seen in the movies, or any medications we can give to keep the bone calcium in the bones. And then exercise, of course, helps, and good nutrition keeps. That's what actually we found it works the best is good exercise and good nutrition. That helps to keep. So lots of problems and lots of solutions we have due to the G forces.
It's interesting you say about bones because we actually had a question in from Anaya and Eunice, who both aged 9 in Hologram Primary. What happens if an astronaut breaks a bone or gets badly injured in space? How do you help them?
Yes, that's a great question, you guys and gals. So we have a small medical kit that we send with them, and then they can call us. I'm holding up my phone. Maybe you can't see it. They call us on the telephone, so they can call us on our mobile. And when I'm working a space mission, I have to be able to answer the phone in 5 minutes if they call me up, or I have to be able to go into the mission control within 1 hour, and then I can give them advice on how to treat those things. Sometimes they can't reach me, so because maybe we've lost signal for a period of time, so they have procedures that they have that are written down that they can take and they can use if they have some sort of maybe a cut, or maybe hopefully we never have a broken bone, but if they have a broken bone or they have difficulty breathing or they had a fire or something like that, they have procedures they can follow. So long story short is we have a little medical kit. We can give them advice. They can call their doctor on the telephone, or they have some references that they can use while they're waiting for their doctor.
Um, so yeah, it sounds like being prepared is one of the very important things to do. So having that kit really works, and obviously having a doctor on the other end of the phone must help. We've had a few questions in that are quite similar, so I'm going to combine them into one, and that is, what has been the biggest challenge you've faced so far, and what's been the scariest moment so far?
Oh gosh, both scary and challenge and fun. I can tell you it was fun. Was about a year and a half ago, one of our Soyuzes lost all the coolant. We think a little asteroid or a little piece of space junk hit the Soyuz, and they lost all the air conditioning, which is not a big deal unless it's really hot. It's hot in Houston. It doesn't get too hot in the UK, but sometimes you guys know how hot it gets. Well, we lost all the coolant. And the problem in space is that you have to have coolant because you have to keep the vehicle and also the crew members cool. Well, we didn't have any couldn't cool down the vehicle. So we thought, and it was going to be so bad that maybe the crew members would be overheated when we brought them back. So we had to figure out a way to get a new space vehicle back up to them. But in the meantime, we had to figure out how to do new procedures, and also there's a chance that we might have to bring back our astronauts and our cosmonauts in a different vehicle and put them into the cargo section. And we didn't have proper seats for them, like showed you with Katie Coleman. She had a proper seat, so we had to kind of make new seats on board the space station. And then I had to really tell the engineers, hey, this is why we're doing it. I had to explain to the engineers that if you overheat your body, it can be harmful for you and maybe very dangerous. So I had to figure out how to talk to engineers about medical things. So those were the challenging. The good fun thing was that I didn't have to do it by myself. We had lots of people to talk with. I had my friends in Russia. We were actually friends with between the medical together. We worked together. So it was a challenge, but it was a fun challenge. It was scary, but because of all the training and the friendships and the people we work with, we were able to work through. And so Frank Rubio, he came back after a year mission, and we got a new vehicle up to him, and we did all those other preparations. So it ended in success.
Oh, brilliant. Again, it sounds like working together and being prepared has just really helped. So we've got, and I was hoping this question would come in. This question's from Whitehurst Park Primary School. What are the first steps towards becoming an astronaut?
The first steps is to have the dream and the vision that you think you might want to do it, and seeing how much fun it is. That's the first step. And then the second step in all those steps is to talk to your teachers and your parents about, hey, what kind of education and training might I need? And then number three is to maybe write to the astronauts and write to other professionals, just like, primary engineering. You talk with people who are doing what you want to do and ask them, hey, I'm a student. How do I do what you do? And and I'll share this with you, because you guys have and gals have student rights, you can ask anybody anything and they have to tell you, because we were all students once too. And it's harder when you get older because some people won't let you in their door. But as a student, they usually should open their door and talk with you if you have those things. So those are the steps.
Oh, brilliant. So that's some advice. Hopefully you've all written that one down. So we've
Student
got this
rights.
next question in from Aidan in year 6. And Aidan wants to know, would the hologram technology ever be made available to school children so they can meet astronauts in space?
Absolutely, yes. I'm trying to get the money to be able to do that. And so thank you for saying that, because I'm going to go to my bosses and I'm going to tell them, I heard from a bunch of school kids in the UK that they want to do this. And the crazy thing is it only uses 1.5 megabytes. So even less than you usually use to do like a FaceTime or something like that.
Wow.
And so the other fun thing is that you can do it two-way. So, we were the first humans that were holoported to space, but you can also have the astronauts be holoported to you. And the fun thing is you don't need to actually use you can use the HoloLens if you want to, but you can also use an iPhone or Android or tablet and all that kind of stuff. So yes, it's coming. And with your question, I'm going to go to my boss and say, hey, we got school kids that want to do this.
Yeah, you can go to your boss and say, Aidan's asked that he wants to
I
talk to
will.
it's a hologram in school. So we've got time for a few more questions. And I've got to get this one in from Pippa, who's 8. And Pippa wants to know, can children go to space?
Hey, Pepper. Not yet, but I bet they will be. There's a question of, and it's only a matter of time that children will be able to go to space. Just like, the first balloons, they took actually animals. They put a rooster on there. I think there were 3 animals, and then finally some people flew on it. And then they had airplanes. And first of all, it was, one person on the airplane. And then they started like passenger airplanes, and everybody got to go. So yes, it's going to happen.
I think there's time for 2 more questions. This question is from the Chameleon class in Wimborne Primary School. What's been your favourite project so far?
Oh, I was
The
an
hardest
Aquanaut.
question.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So many are so fun. Everything I get. So once I was an Aquanaut. So if you look in Wikipedia, it's got a picture of me as an Aquanaut, and it basically we were in an analog environment, and so I got to go live in the sea, 47 feet below the surface, more than 24 hours. And when you go more than 24 hours, everything equalizes in the gases in your body, and so you live in the ocean. And it was crazy fun. And for 12 days we lived there, It was some of the most fun I've ever had in my life. And I trained with the astronauts, as I mentioned, because we were all doing the diving together. We saw fish that were there. We saw sharks, and we were explorers. So look up Aquanaut, and you'll see my picture. I didn't put that on there, but somebody did, and it talks about being an aquanaut. So you can fly, you can dive, you can go to space, you can work with engineers, you can do holoportation, you can do all this crazy stuff. And the fun thing is that it's always changing. You're always doing new things.
So we're pushed for time now, so I've only got time for one last question, Joseph. Now there's about 3,000 school pupils on this call, so this is a big question. If somebody out there has watched this presentation and said to themselves, "I want to do that," what advice do you have for them?
Contact somebody who's doing what you like to do and ask them, how do you get to do what you do? So contact them, write to them, call them, have your parents write to them, and then just ask them, how do you train? And you can be from anywhere. You can be homeschooled, you can be from a bigger school. Um, I was not too rich when I grew up, and I found out a way to get some scholarships and things like that. So, and I've talked to people from many different countries. It doesn't matter where you're at. So have the dream and find out somebody who's doing your dream and ask them if they could share how to do that. That's what I advise. Just like what primary engineers, you guys and gals talk with engineers, and they love talking with you. So find an engineer, find somebody who's doing what you want to do, and ask them, how do you do that? And can I work with you? And often they'll have work for you to do with them.
Well, find the person doing what you want to do and ask them how they do it. I think that's excellent advice, and I think that's a great place to end this interview. I would just like to say thank you to everyone for joining us, but a massive thank you to Joseph for helping inspire all the engineers in the making out there. Thank you as well, Joseph, for joining us so early. I know you're currently in California, so it's about 7:30 a.m. So we very much appreciate it. For everybody out there, it is now your turn to come up with your own engineering ideas. Remember and send them to us once you've finished, so we can get our certificates sent out to you, and then we'll hopefully see you all at our public exhibitions at the end of the school year. Our service delivery team are on hand to support all the teachers throughout the competition, so any questions you have, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Caitlin, Jess, Beth, Louisa and Josh are all there to help. For those teachers as well, we are also hosting Teach Meet sessions this year where you get a chance to meet the team who created the resources and ask any questions. Our next Teach Meet is at 4:30 p.m. on November 14th. But I'd just like to give one massive final thank you to Joseph. And remember, if you were an engineer, what would you do?